we were then told that he would possibly, that we were waiting on a decision. That deadline went by 6 months. They still hadn't met that deadline. We're still championing that this is a child that's about to start secondary. He cannot do it without this healthcare plan. And I actually rang personally and said, I am desperate. I have to get this in place before he starts, because he cannot start on the wrong foot. We'll never undo that. He has to go there with it all in place. And we need to know the support he's going to get to give this the best chance of success. And I was actually told, and this absolutely shocked me, but it is a real indication of where we're at on how the system is so squeezed, and there is not enough resources, funding, anything. It is incredibly broken. I was told he was currently number 70 still on this list out of hundreds and hundreds. We were 6 months past the deadline. The only way he would be able to supersede to the top of that list was if not only was he suicidal or a threat to others, but he'd actively had to actually try to harm himself or somebody else. And I thought, wow, why would you want any child, any adult, but any child to get to that point before we can access help? To 4 amazing children, the hardest but most precious job in the world. We are a neurodiverse household, definitely. We didn't know this at the beginning. Dan and I, my husband Dan, we very much learned about ourselves through our children. So we've got 4 children, the eldest 17 and the youngest has just turned 11. 2 are diagnosed ADHD. One has quite moderate learning difficulties, and then we've got Florence, who's dyslexic and dysgraphic, and then there's Henry, who's just got quirks. He's just quirky, bless him.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Julie. And what was that kind of experience? Because you mentioned that you went down kind of the diagnosed route. What was that kind of experience like, sort of pre going down that route, and then the kind of the journey on that? What did that kind of look like?
So for both the 2 children that are diagnosed, it was totally different experiences. So with Harry, and Harry's about to turn 13, I knew from the moment we were graced with his presence, bless him, that there was just something slightly different on how he was, his personality, his energy levels, his kind of thinking process from a really young age compared to his 2 older sisters. And that's all I had to compare it against. When we enter parenthood, it's very much you learn on the job. And he arrived with a bang, absolutely. He had energy levels that I just could not keep up with. He very much had this intriguing personality. He was into everything, wanted to get involved with everything, but he absolutely saw no kind of fear aspect or danger aspect. And obviously for quite a long time, you put that down to age and things. It wasn't really until we were in primary school and I'd kind of expressed for quite a long time that I felt that Harry was possibly ADHD, or certainly on the spectrum, possibly somewhere. And I kind of met resistance. The school were like, no, he's a late developer. It's immaturity, all that jazz. I spoke to others, and if I'm honest, I was let, certainly with some family members, older family members, it's parenting. He's out of control, you're not hard enough on him, that type of thing. And it went on. And actually, it was a really stressful time because I kind of knew that we were struggling to kind of manage Harry in the best way possible. But actually, when I reached for help, everybody was like, no, can't see it. And obviously, you know, one of the main things that they say when you want to kind of go down any kind of route of, you know, diagnosis is certain traits or symptoms, whatever, have to be present in more than one area. So if I'm only seeing them at home, but they're not seeing it in the school place or anything like that, then, you know, that's not it. It was only when we went to a doctor's appointment, because Harry also he has gastro problems and struggles with weight. So he kind of went on a program where he met with the doctor once a month over a 6-month period, just to kind of check in on weight gain and make sure there was nothing actually physically wrong as to why he was struggling. And it was during that process that actually at the end of it, the doctor happened to say to me, if you ever, you know, tell me a bit about you, a bit about Harry, his home life, everything else. And it was him that raised it with me. And that was actually after Harry was, you know, kindly under his desk trying to unplug the computer and get in the drawers and, you know, everything else. And he was like, and he said, I said, but nobody can see it. It's only me. And he absolutely was like, no, I see it. And that was the start of that journey. And he made the first referral. We went through the process. It is lengthy. And actually back then, I'm pretty certain it was a lot quicker than what it is now. So that I actually was in tears that day, because for once I felt, my goodness, thank you. Somebody can see this. It's not me. I'm not, you know, it's not all my you know, it's not parenting or all parenting. And that was great. We went on, he eventually did get a diagnosis, and we didn't medicate Harry up until recently when he started secondary, and that was our own personal choice. With Lily, who's also diagnosed, totally different experience. She, now looking back on it, masked beautifully all through primary school. I would get feedback like, she's away with the fairies, she doesn't listen, she doesn't engage, she's dramatic, over dramatic, but nothing more than that. Her learning was on track, her social skills were absolutely great. There wasn't the energy levels that we had with her brothers. She, you know, I absolutely did not even question it. It was only when we made the transition to secondary with Lily that it all started to unravel slightly. And the first parents' evening, I went and I said on the way there, you know, Lily, is there anything you think they're going to, you know, say to me? She was like, they'll probably tell you I'm too chatty. And I was like, okay, fine. Well, I came out of there and I felt like I was ripped to shreds. She was disruptive. She had been in multiple detentions that I didn't even, you know about. She was just generally being a nuisance, and it was not on my radar. And I was like, wow, like I've never had any of this with her, you know. And that went on, and it was only really, and in year 9 where I'd kind of campaigned that actually I think there's more to this, and I'd got a better understanding of Lily, but she'd then gone into, so she'd gone through the really unruly phase at school of not respecting rules, boundaries. She was struggling to access the work, but wouldn't say that, so she just became kind of the class clown, really, you know, to mask all that. She definitely had friendship struggles, things like that. So we went through that, and I kept saying, I think there's more to this, wouldn't be heard. Then she went through the stage of school withdrawal. She refused to go, end of, which was awful, because if anybody's ever been in that situation where your child is refusing school, and yet the law obviously says they've got to go, and they need to go, it is awful, because you just do not know what to do. Then she became very reclusive, then the self-harming started, then the self-medicating started. And it was a really, really tough journey for Lily and for the whole family. And in the end, the school was still not really on board. They just seen her as a pain in the bum. It was only after we ended up paying privately for a diagnosis on a credit card because we didn't have the access to the funds, to literally produce a piece of paper to be able to then hand it to the school and say, now will you take this seriously? And actually, once we produced that piece of paper, we got to access all the SEND departments, and school suddenly became a slightly more accessible place for her. But we'd taken 3.5 years, right up to kind of real prep for GCSEs before we got to that point. And I actually, as a mum, I absolutely live with that guilt pretty much every day, because I feel that I let her down, because I was so focused on Harry, who presented so differently, and she masked so well. But I feel that I was so focused on him that I absolutely missed her. And it ended up being a really stressful few years for her.
Bless you, Judy. That's incredibly difficult, and I guess, you know, with regards to kind of masking, it is what it says, isn't it? It's masking, and I know that would have been really a really kind of turbulent time of not knowing, you know, not being able to do the processes of how schools are set up, and then who can she speak to, and I guess it was trying to understand how she was dealing with it as well. So I can imagine it was a massive shock for everyone involved.
No, not really. And I think as well, she kind of probably knew that. I think she went through this frustration phase of knowing that she wasn't necessarily finding the school transition as easy as others. She wasn't accessing the learning as easy as others. She was certainly finding kind of the concentration elements that were, and the independency that was required of secondary, and building relationships with lots of teachers a struggle. But she just saw that as a failure on her, and that she didn't know how to articulate that either. She just knew that she was massively out of her comfort zone there. So when we then started to really look into this, and then once we got a diagnosis, I think on one element, you know, she was probably disappointed, but not so much, because Harry had been diagnosed many years before. We already had a lot of knowledge. So, and we very much speak about it very highly in our family. You know, it's not seen as any way kind of you're derogative or less of anything. You know, we see it as superpowers in our household. So that was fine. She was very well supported. I think she felt relief that she actually now, for her, had, as much as we don't like to label anybody, but she had a better understanding of actually the struggles she was having and why that might be.
Massive thank you to our sponsors, Orcam Learn, who are doing incredible work. So Orcam, a few years ago, Orcam reached out and they gave me the Orcam Read, which was a phenomenal piece of kit. And I used this throughout a lot of the travels that I did on a global scale. But they have now designed and developed an incredible next stage to this, the Orcam Learn, and please do check out our sponsors video.
And here it is, the cool and colorful Orcam Learn. All you have to do is point and click for Orcam Learn to instantly capture any text, like a textbook, classroom handout, and computer screens, and the device will read it out loud or through a Bluetooth audio device.
Daedalus was a brilliant inventor and craftsman who lived in ancient Greece.
Orcam is the only reading technology in the world that can capture full pages of text and screens. And that's not all. Orcam Learn's Hey Orcam voice assistant uses natural language understanding technology to allow students to check their understanding of content. And check this out. We engineered the core features of this amazing device to operate completely offline, making it ideal for in-class use and taking exams independently. Orcam Learn. The future of learning fits comfortably in your hand.
I mean, I got diagnosed at the age of 36. So, and for me, you know, prior to that, I'd had a turbulent time in school, in the educational system, kind of let down massively, left with no qualifications, and then went into the workplace and absolutely loved the workplace. That was my my kind of playground, so to speak, and there was lots of struggles as well within this. But it wasn't, and I managed to carve out a really successful career in the corporate sector. But the underlying guilt, the shame, I guess, that I didn't have any qualifications, I hid that. And for many, many years, whenever people were talking about college or university, it was not something that I couldn't even think about, because it wasn't on my radar. And it wasn't until the age of 36 I got diagnosed. That was, as you mentioned with Lily, that moment of, okay, it was like, I understand. The thing that I had to go through, I guess, is then reliving some of the moments where I felt I wasn't good enough. It's something else, and these other things which you have to kind of work through. But it's a real shame that you had to go through that long period of time to, theoretically, I guess. I mean, I know it's not just a piece of paper, but what's on it is powerful. But for then the process to then really speed up and people to start listening to you, it seems a really, I probably use the word frustrating system put in place for that.
No, absolutely. I mean, for Lily, it was frustrating because, without that piece of paper, the school were just not prepared to even entertain the idea. Once we got the piece of paper, like I said, things changed. She had exit cards. They absolutely, some lessons she didn't do. They gave, they did put in a lot more provision, and it absolutely turned her around. And there was a point where we were talking that Lily was going to have to leave school early. She was going to have to go to a college setting because, that's where we were at with her. But actually, once we got there, they slowly but surely, the SEND departments are amazing. These people are massive champions for their children, but equally they do not have enough hours in a day, days in a week to deal with this. But it did absolutely help. And she went on and she finished school. She got her GCSEs in English and maths, which were absolutely amazing. But she absolutely, on her last day, everybody, it was emotional and that, but she was out of there. She was never going back through those school doors again. And if you talk to her about it, she does not have a positive thing to say about her experiences in school. With Harry, I had the opposite, where this transition to secondary was coming, and he was now in year 7. I'd been fighting for an EHCP, so a healthcare plan to help support him through school. And for anybody that's ever done this, they will know that it is a really hard battle to have, and it takes a long time. The waiting lists are huge. And the reality was, so with Lily, we were not on. I did not want to go through this again, where I've got a child in an environment where the law says they have to go and do, but actually he is academically, they ran their own assessments. He had the academic abilities of a 6-7-year-old, yet he was about to access secondary school education. Obviously, he's got short-term memory issues, focus issues, concentration issues. Unless it's something he's interested in, then he is the champion at focusing. But school is not really his jam, but the law says he's got to go and he's got to sit at a desk quietly, listen, conform, do all these things that his brain really does not want to do. So I didn't want this experience where then I've got another child that's not refusing to go to school, has become reclusive, lots of negative self-talk, self-harm. I was not prepared to go down this route again. So I absolutely thought that he needed a support plan before he went to secondary. There was no way he was going to, in my opinion, was going to be able to access secondary school education without it. Because he fits in no man's land. He's socially amazing. So socially amazing. Plus, slightly is vulnerable because he's very literal and he doesn't always perceive, kind of further ahead. But socially is amazing. So he doesn't warrant any kind of special school. But equally, he was no way near ready to be able to access secondary education. He fitted in no man's land. The first time I did in the HCP, it got rejected. So we had to start all over again. At that point, the primary school got on board because now he's actually becoming quite a nuisance for them. And he's spending a lot of time in separate rooms, in the corridor, having a lot more teacher intervention. But there's no provision in place. But actually, they could really do with it now, but it's not a quick process. But they were fantastic. They really got on board and did help with the application. but the way they, the council missed the deadlines because there was a shortage of educational psychologists. Even though he had all the reports he needed, they wanted him seen by theirs. It delayed it. So we were waiting. We were then told that he would possibly, that we were waiting on a decision. That deadline went by 6 months. They still hadn't met that deadline. We're still championing that this is a child that's about to start secondary. He cannot do it without this healthcare plan. And I actually rang personally and said, I am desperate. I have to get this in place before he starts, because he cannot start on the wrong foot. We'll never undo that. He has to go there with it all in place. And we need to know the support he's going to get to give this the best chance of success. And I was actually told, and this absolutely shocked me, but it is a real indication of where we're at on how the system is so squeezed, and there is not enough resources, funding, anything. It is incredibly broken. I was told he was currently number 70 still on this list out of hundreds and hundreds. We were 6 months past the deadline. The only way he would be able to supersede to the top of that list was if not only was he suicidal or a threat to others, but he'd actively had to actually try to harm himself or somebody else. And I thought, wow, why would you want any child, any adult, but any child to get to that point before we can access help? But eventually, to cut a very long story short, we did finally get his healthcare plan in place, literally the week before he started secondary school. So we got there in the end, but the stress it caused for years and years fighting for that it was tough going. And I do feel, because I'm fortunate enough, I work from home, I'm relatively articulate, I can keep writing letters, doing reports, filling forms, but not everybody has these capabilities. What do you do in that situation? Not everybody has that time. So that was hard, but he did get the healthcare plan, and it now means he doesn't have to access languages, he doesn't have to access subjects, and he does get intervention, which helps him, and it is making school accessible. He's certainly challenging at school, but he is still going.
I'm so still blown away emotionally what you said about I guess the fact of what stage a child needs to be in before it supersedes in the support that happens. And as a mother, hearing those things is you just don't want to hear that or even think about that side of it.
Absolutely not. I was floored by it. I just thought, wow, why would any child have to get to that stage before? And that's why it's really frustrating, because you do hear, general adverts or campaigns or whatever, help's available, but actually the reality is it is not available, and it's certainly not available in a timely manner. And that can be incredibly lonely and incredibly isolating when you're actually a family going through this and you're desperate for help, but it's just not there.
And going through the process, once is incredibly tough and tiring. And as you mentioned, being able to write those forms out and call people and continuously fight, which is what every parent wants to do for their children. They only want, when all's said and done, they just want the very best for their children. That's that's what you want. But as you mentioned, that process once is tough. To go through it twice, but as you mentioned, not everyone is able to do those things, to continuously fight, because behind every form or behind every conversation is the emotional roller coaster that you're going on, and it can just drain you, I'm sure.
It absolutely can. And actually, I'm undiagnosed ADHD. That's something I've learned through my children. My husband also is, though he's been not officially diagnosed, but every kind of appointment we've ever been with the children, they're 100% is a bit of a joke that they'll often give him the fidget toys as much as the child. But actually, I was because this was so passionate to me, and as any mother, we all want what's best for our children. So I absolutely hyper-focused in on championing for the support for Harry, for the support for Lily. But by a result of that hyper-focus comes in, that you lose context of other things that are going on around you. It causes problems in other areas because that's not getting your attention now, because you're so, focused in on this. And then once you finally get there, the burnout that it leaves you with, because you're just exhausted, that's a whole thing. And again, it's that self, like I said to you earlier, the self-guilt, giving myself a hard time, why did, you haven't done this quick enough, you haven't been on it enough, you didn't pick this up earlier, it's such a round robin, you just go around in circles. But unfortunately, and teachers, the school are great, and I think they're definitely becoming much more aware of neurodiversities, but you'll find there are some teachers that are absolutely fantastic and they just go above and beyond. And then there's others that they're, at the end of the day, they just want to teach secondary school education in whatever chosen subject, to a whole classroom of children, and the resources aren't there. So if you have got children like Harry in the classroom who can't really access it, but the law says he's got to be there. So what he does is he then does become distracting, and he does become a bit of a nuisance in the classroom, which makes their jobs harder. He actually he spends a lot of his time stood in the corridor outside. And that's not their fault. They're there to teach, that's what they've chose to do. Even though, his healthcare plan says that, TA support, that TA support is also managing other children like Harry within that classroom, and budgets are stretched, they get pulled in all directions. The school have sat with all the teachers and really explained about Harry, because he is very complex, as will be lots of other children in that school. And I still look at his class charts, which is how they kind of record it, and the E behaviours, so that's like negative behaviours, are huge. And it is all things for lack of focus, lack of concentration, interrupting, forgot his PE kit, things like this, that he genuinely, that's something he's going to struggle with anyway. To be organised, to even get himself ready to do, is quite overwhelming in itself. And however many times you think, wow, yes, he's come without a pen today, but he's there. Do we need to punish him for that when he's actually fought such a bigger battle to get there today? He will never, the law says he has to go to school and he has to sit in a classroom at a desk to do subjects that do not interest him in the slightest, but the law says he has to go. But I can assure you that he will never, once he, gets to leave school, he will absolutely excel in whatever he chooses to do. But it will not be in an office-based, probably, environment where he's sat at a desk all day long doing something. And it's such a shame that the system is very much one box fits all, and all our children have to fit into that kind of educational system, when actually not all our children do fit into it, but there is no provision at the moment for that. And that's what I'd love to see change.
Absolutely, and such incredible points raised, Judy, and I guess it's such a long period of time as well, isn't it? If you take secondary school in the UK, it's 5 years, and then there's sixth form or college, and then further education, if that's the route you want to go down. But if I start thinking about doing something that I have very little interest in, and I have to do it and conform, I probably use that word loosely, conform, but for 5 years terrifies me.
It does. And they've extended it, so a child really has to be in some kind of educational setting till they're 18 now, which is great, and there's, apprenticeships, things like that are amazing. So that's all good, but equally, there are some children that actually would just so much more benefit from being able to go out, get a job in, in whatever they want to do, or any social environment, whatever, and just start to learn then what it is they do enjoy, other skills that they, in environment settings that they wouldn't get through school, and just be able to go on in a different direction. But it is what, it swings and roundabouts, and this is only our personal experiences.
Yeah. How does Harry deal with the kind of the isolation side of it that you know of? The only reason I mention this is because for 5 years of my secondary school education, or high school, if you listen to this in America, the isolation side of it was really tough, because I was put into a thing called the unit, which is a porta cabin in the middle of the field for pretty much most of my school. And I was allowed to sit certain lessons like drama, art, PE, and CDT, I think was craft design technology. That was the kind of subjects that I was allowed to kind of sit. But for me, the biggest thing within school was to just try and, I guess for me, was just try and keep my head down and just be a part of something. So be a part of, whether it's a friendship group or be in a football team or something else like this. And each day for me, taking me out of a classroom environment and putting me in my own. I mean, there were a couple of other students in there, but they weren't really there, so to speak. They come and gone. How does that kind of, from a social point of view, because I know Harry's, incredibly social in the sense of, articulate and those things. Does that ever come up? You mentioned about he stands in the corridor and things, or
it is. Yeah, it does, because it's kind of it makes what school that he already finds incredibly challenging and not enjoyable, other than the social element, which is really the only element that gets him there. So this already really challenging thing that he has to get up and do every single day, like Monday to Friday, about obviously holidays and all the rest of it. But every day he has to do that. So then not only does he now have to do that, but you've taken away the one main reason he's going, and that is a social element. And also what happens is, any of the kind of consequences of whatever's gone on in that lesson tends to be taken up in break times and lunch times. So his free time, where would be a really good opportunity for him to go, get outside, burn off some energy, all that jazz, is now being dealt with, being told whatever it is he's done wrong, and everything else. And then he has to go straight back then into another lesson. The other problem we get is he can rack up detentions relatively quickly. And then he's got to manage remembering these detentions and which rooms he's got to go to, and then attend them. And then if he does forget, he'll then get that that kind of consequence escalates to the point where in the end he just gets to that point where he's like, I can do no right, like I'm done. And then we go down a whole different spiral with the behavioral aspects then. So, but the school that we are at are really, they do try. They are very much really trying to kind of to navigate Harry through this the best we can, because there's other children, certainly with neurodiversities there, that absolutely academically thrive. They might find the environment challenging or some subjects, but they academically thrive. But there also will be others like Harry that academically do not thrive. And so for us, my main goal as a parent, as it is for my husband's, is just to get our children through the educational system as mentally intact and as self-confident as possible. If they come out the other end mentally intact and still with kind of self-confidence and that real, a really good feeling and enthusiasm for life, then we feel that we've done our job, because actually GCSEs for them, not all of them, but 2-3 of them is genuinely not that accessible. They're not going to be able to kind of to do that. The law says they have to. They've still got to go in an exam room and sit it, even though they've absolutely no realistic chance of being able to read it, understand it, answer it. But that's not, we don't celebrate the results here. We celebrate the effort that goes into doing what it is you're doing, and we absolutely acknowledge everybody's triumphs, but it just might be different triumphs to what other households have, and that's fine.
I absolutely love that, Jodie. And you mentioned about the well-being and the mindfulness of child's education and not just the education, but their life as they're growing and developing, and celebrating the incredible things that they do, and not just harness. You mentioned early on in this conversation the fact that if he didn't turn up with a pen or a pencil, that he'd be reprimanded, in the sense of that would be a derogatory thing, in the sense of you didn't come in this, but like you said, the journey of getting up, getting there, and being present in that environment. and we really do need to start celebrating more of the positives.
Absolutely, definitely. And don't get me wrong, we obviously have boundaries. We don't use any of ours, the children's diagnosis, as an excuse for kind of lack of respect or, you know, general rudeness, you know, that we don't, that's not, you know, that doesn't, just because they're diagnosed doesn't give them the right to be disrespectful to people. It doesn't give them the right to be rude to others, or, you know, whether that be, you know, the teachers, their friends, whatever, you know, but there has to be some allowances. You know, that if these children have these kind of cognitive differences, then that has to be taken into account, you know. And that's the same for Florence. You know, she's dyslexic and dysgraphic. She is an absolute triumph in that she has to work probably 10 times harder than somebody else possibly to just get through the day and access that work. And it will take her a lot longer. But do you know what? She absolutely gives it her all. But that comes at a price of exhaustion and self, you know, worth. And why am I finding this so hard? They sit tests, you know, and everybody will finish. And she's looking at the paper thinking, oh my God, I'm only halfway through, you know, because she's had to read it, reread it, start it, correct it, change it. You know, the process is a lot longer. It just takes longer, but absolutely she's able. But it's just, yeah, I just still think there's quite a way to go. Yeah.
I think
there's a massive way to go. Yeah.
I think the exhaustion side of it, as you mentioned, you know, I remember going to school and being sat in a classroom and I can literally still feel this moment. So it must have been enriched, you know, ingrained into my mind that the moment of sitting in the classroom and the teacher talking about a certain subject, everyone putting their hands up or scribbling down on, you know, within their books. And I remember always asking this question, why don't I get it? What's wrong with me? Why don't I get it? Why don't I just get it? And I remember walking home from school, I had continuous migraines as a child, going home from school, like continuously, to a point where they had to, you know, get my, you know, things checked out because they were quite concerned. But what it was is I felt actually at some points like my brain was physically frying, where I was just so burnt out, where it just felt like it was continuously moving. And the exhaustion side of it was just, you know, and talking at a very young age was just, it was really hard to deal with. And you just didn't get it. And that I don't think is the kind of the blind side of things, is that we see people from the outside, but we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I am glad, because I reflect back to kind of things that definitely progressed. And certainly, you know, myself and my husband, when we were in school, I mean, my husband was just classed as unruly and stupid. There was certainly no mention of kind of, you know, neurodiversities or ADHD kind of back then. He didn't even have the opportunity to sit his GCSEs. And yet has gone on to absolutely, you know, succeed in life. You know, he runs his own business. He's an amazing father. We've built our own house, absolutely thrived. But that came later on, once he worked out what it is he wanted to do. He's an electrician. He had none of the prequels to do the course because he didn't even sit GCSEs. He absolutely championed away for 4 or 5 years at night school. He failed the exams. He did them again. He failed them. He did them until he got to where he wants to be. And he is a true champion, that you can absolutely succeed in life without a full set of, you know, glowing GCSE results and, you know, everything that comes from the educational setting. You just, you know, you absolutely will find your own way. And that's good, because like I said, back then, certainly, like, neurodiversity, ADHD was not mentioned. And the same for myself, you know, I learned to make eye contact with people. I learned to kind of, and I didn't know, I've only learned this through my children. When I, you know, I look at Lily and my mum's like, she's ever so much like you. And then suddenly you think, wow, I've been diagnosed with depression all my adult working life. And actually, I'm pretty certain I've got a lot else going on there. I've just learned to manage it, to mask it, and I have to work a lot harder just to do that. But that's fine.
Well, I think you do an incredible job, Judy, and I don't think you give yourself enough credit for this. It's really difficult when we speak about neurodiversity and we speak about dyslexia and ADHD and all the different facets that surround it. And I guess it's one of the things that I learned, which was quite astonishing, is that when I found out that I had dyslexia, I thought, okay, so I'm like such and such, and I'm like such and such. And then it was like, no, you're not. And that was the biggest thing for me, to understand that my dyslexia was different to someone else's dyslexia and someone else's dyslexia, and so on and so on. So then I started thinking, okay, so I'm not like them, but I have dyslexia. They have dyslexia. Yeah, but it's different. How different? We don't know. The scale's so big. And from someone from the outside looking in, they go, okay, so if I have a student who has dyslexia, we'll support and we do this. No, it doesn't work, because they may have more ADHD than they might have dyslexia. They might have dyspraxia. And I think that as a society, trying to understand that, I guess, can be quite difficult. However, what we do need to do as a society is really kind of just sort of home in and look at the individuals. And I think that's what you've done, in the sense of, you've experienced it through, the different children's abilities and what they enjoy and what they thrive at and what they don't necessarily, enjoy doing. And I think having those, how important do you think those plans that were put in place? I mean, don't get me wrong, they don't just solve every problem, but having those plans in the school, were they effective enough to able to support you, or do you think that they could be a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the plans are effective enough to allow Harry to access an educational system. I don't think they're effective enough for him to thrive from it, personally. But they do make school accessible, because a lot of it is the plans are in place, but it's the funding that's the issue. The funding that's awarded isn't enough. And then the reality is that the schools are so short, the budgets for schools are so tight anyway, that this funding probably gets eaten up slightly anyway with just the general basics of kind of running a school. So even though on paper, we have X, Y, and Z, and Harry gets X amount of hours one-to-one, and things like that, it means that he can get through school, and it means that he is heard and he has a place to go. He has that right that he can go and offload to somebody and vent about what it is and get it off his chest, and they can then re-talk back, and then he can go back to the classroom. It means that he does get one-to-one for basic kind of literacy and maths, which is incredibly important. But that's about it. He's not going to come away from school with much else than that. And that's fine. It gets him through the system, but he certainly doesn't thrive there at all. But it does mean that it is accessible, and he will be able to hopefully get through the secondary school journey.
It's almost just making it understood that there is support needed, and they will do their best to try and do as much as they can within the support. But it's to try and, I guess, sort of bring him us up to kind of a level on par with others. But it doesn't always work that way, does it?
No, I mean, he'll never be, certainly for Harry, but like I said, Lily got her GCSEs in English and maths, it's all different, but he'll never be able to kind of, for Harry, GCSEs are really inaccessible. And personally, I feel, why does he need to sit them? But the law says he has to. So you're kind of setting him up to fail from the beginning. He's going to sit at that desk in a room full of others, possibly in a room separate with just a handful of people. But nevertheless, he's going to sit and look at a piece of paper and straight away is going to be totally overwhelmed, and he will not be able to access that. But the law says he has to do it. And I personally don't see why you would put anybody in that situation. But that's that. Like I said, for Lily, she actually did go on and and get, some of her grades, and there'll be other children that absolutely smash it out of the park. So it's so different, because like you said, I mean, surely we're all on the spectrum somewhere. I think we're all on the spectrum, and all neurodiversities, like you said, you kind of have bits of this, bits of that. It's everybody's so unique, so different, which is amazing, because who'd want to be in a world where we're all exactly the same? We'd be robots. It would be incredibly boring.
Yeah.
So I think that's great, and the neurotypical brain, the neurodiverse brain, maybe the neurodiverse ones are actually, maybe we've got it all right here, maybe everybody should be like us, so who knows? I think, but I just know that we are all unique, and whatever labels we have, diagnoses we have, whatever systems in place, we are all our unique people. And I think we have to be very supportive that what works for one doesn't for another, and we are very inclusive of being supportive of everybody and their needs to the best that we can be, regardless of the label, because there will be loads of people that don't have a diagnosis, and you shouldn't have to go and get that label to warrant support, really. We had to, but you shouldn't have to. So I just think, I don't think, you can't keep, people don't always fit in boxes. We can't keep categorizing ourselves. We're all just a unique bunch.
Absolutely, Judy. I'm just going to bring in a couple of comments, if that's okay. So Kelly Clark, totally eye-opening. Thank you. The mental health aspect is huge also. And I just want to bring this one in. The system appears focused in the main on demotivating rather than should be the opposite. Listening to a child and can be led by what motivates them. It's the issue that there isn't enough resources in place to deal with the individual needs to each of the children. I completely agree with the celebration of efforts we do the same in their household is essential to both of our children's well-being. I think an issue can be the level of understanding of this approach across the board when the kids are feeling overwhelmed. Thank you so much for sharing that. I
absolutely agree. I totally agree to that comment, 100%.
It is. I don't think as a society we celebrate enough. I think what someone's success. It's questionable in the sense of what one person's success is to another person's success. But I guess when we're talking about maybe the workplace or the educational sector, there are certain levels that you need to boxes to tick, or certain successes that you need to do to actually be awarded of those success. And I think, I think sometimes the smaller things you can do are should be just as rewarded as the larger things.
Absolutely. I think everybody, children, adults, we all need to be celebrated. We all have amazing abilities in one area or another. We are all gifted in one area or another. But sometimes I think these areas, aren't recognized or aren't acknowledged or seen as triumphs, because just that's what society perceives to be a successful person, absolutely. And I do think that's something else that the schools need to focus on, is kind of certainly like sporting events and things, things like that should be celebrated. If anything, whether it be sporting events, hobbies that children do outside of school that they excel in, should be absolutely brought into the school environment and acknowledged and celebrated, just like it does exam results and all the rest of it. I think that would really, that would be such a great boost, because everybody is great at something.
Absolutely. Judy, I want to thank you so much for coming up to our time. I want to thank you so much for being so honest and also sharing your incredible journey. And I think yourself and Dan are doing an incredible job. And I hope from this that you take the praise. You are doing an incredible job. And
thank you.
Helping.
And if there's anybody that ever wants to reach out and just have a good old chin wag or a moan about anything that, within, this kind of setup where you are a neurodiverse household, then absolutely, my ear is, I am always ready and waiting for a good old, for a good old conversation, a good old chat, because it can be a really lonely place. It can be incredibly lonely at times.
And I think that's, such a beautiful piece to leave on, in the sense that you mentioned that it can be incredibly lonely, and having this support mechanism and having conversations and opening conversations like this into a kind of a forum for people to relate to is something that we need to do more, and again, incredibly humbled for you to share your story, Judy.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, it's only our perspective. none of this is necessarily factual. This is just our experiences.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of the Neurodiversity stories, is that we tackle topics, and again, the beauty of it is to come from our opinions. And
next time, Darren, we're going to talk about neurodiversities within marriage.
There we go. We will definitely
have a lot to say on that topic too.
Well then, Jodie, you've just booked another seat in the chair to come back and talk about it. But honestly, in all seriousness, we would love to have you back as another guest to talk about another. That's a topic we've not spoken about before, so I would be again thrilled to discuss that topic. But Jodie, thank you so much for sharing your journey, the incredible journey that children's going on, the incredible success that yourself and Dan have done as well. So have a great rest of the day, an amazing weekend, and we will see you very soon.
Will do. Thank you.